Greetings, welcome to Astrology Awakening, and let me just dive right in. I'm going to try and streamline this info as best I can. I know genetics kind of makes people's heads explode because I have issues just trying to understand what a second cousin is. But first, let's look at this Wikipedia page that details haplogroup EM132, and I'll just read from it. Haplogroup EM132, formerly known as EM33E1A, is a human Y chromosome DNA haplogroup. The real relevant point here is EM132 is divided into two primary subbranches, EM44 and the other one, but we'll just say EM44 because that's the one that's relevant to what I'm talking about. So EM132 is found most often in West Africa, and today it is especially common in the region of Mali. One study has found haplogroup EM132 in as much as 34% of a sample of Malian men. In particular, the Dogon people of Mali have been found to carry haplogroup EM132 with a frequency as high as 45.5%. This makes it perhaps the most common haplogroup in this population. So we'll steer over to my 23andMe page where we find the definition of a haplogroup. First of all, term haplogroup refers to a family of lineages that share a common ancestor and therefore a particular set of mutations. Each paternal haplogroup is named with a letter indicating the major cluster of branches to which it belongs, followed by the name of mutation that is shared by a subset of the major cluster. So here I am, EZ17467, descended from EM44, which I mentioned earlier from the Wikipedia page, and that's a direct descendant of the M132, which comprises 50% of the Dogon population. So, in short, my haplogroup descended from the haplogroup that branched off from the haplogroup that comprises half of the Dogon population. So, twice removed? I don't know. Anyhow, we'll go over to the graph that shows my last 100% African grandparent was born in around the mid 1800s, 1830s, 1840s, which would have coincided with the Trail of Tears that's very near and dear to my ancestry and my legacy, because my Granny Susie was born on a Muskogee Indian reservation in the 1890s, and she claims to have been from the East. Greetings and Namaste. Welcome again to Astrology Awakening. And I wanted to continue to elaborate on something I talked about or teased in another video about the Dogon and their relationship to Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter are the slow-moving planets in our solar system, and they only come together about every 20 years or so. So they only come together in a particular spot, which they came together in 2020 and 2021 as well. Now, Saturn and Jupiter only come together in Capricorn every 60 years, which corresponds very nicely with how frequently the Dogons celebrate their Sigitolo festival. Right on. So here's a really quick article about the Dogon people of Mali to finish the thought about Saturn and Jupiter coming conjunct in Capricorn every 60 years. This article talks about the next Sigitolo festival being in 2027 and the last one being in 1967, which is a 60-year cycle. Now, Sigitolo refers to Sirius A and is the brightest star in our solar system, and is actually incredible to behold. If you look at it, it looks like a projector, like flickering at you. And this was a very important start of the Dogon. I believe they believe this is from whence we come, and also part of the reincarnation system, if you will. To put a fine point on what the article suggested about the dates of the Sigitolo festivals, here we have the chart of 1967 where we see Saturn has moved from Aquarius into Pisces. And now we're looking at 1961, where Saturn was coming from, and there we see our two culprits, Jupiter and Saturn in Capricorn, just as we had in 2020 and 2021. And here we have 2027, where Saturn has moved on into Pisces once again, and they'll have their festival celebrating Jupiter and Saturn having moved on from Capricorn. And what I consider to be most dope and fire about the Dogon is I think they pretty much know that they woke me up, because I was reading about their existence in a book about the pyramids of Giza, which are actually aligned to the Orion constellation, the three stars on Orion's belt. In Vedic, its closest relative is, nakshatra-wise, Ardra. So that would be Beetlejuice. If you know that term, you know the movie Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice and Sirius are part of this Orion family that has a Vedic correlation to the nakshatra Ardra. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, is a movie about reincarnation and the afterlife. So put two and two together, there's a little bit of limited hangout going on, I think, with Tim Burton. The Dogon actually knew about Sirius B and C well before the scientific community was even aware that they existed, until the 1970s, I believe. And then with Sirius B, and then with Sirius C, we didn't know that it existed until around the 2000s. However, the Dogon knew that these stars, which are invisible to the naked eye, existed for as long back as they have their mythology, which they trace back thousands and thousands of years to a species called the Nomo. And the Nomo are an aquatic species and have a kind of interdimensional or space travel component, and fascinatingly enough correspond to Vedic Hindu Naga, who are sacred wisdom keepers that live underground. Okay, I found a good article that kind of compresses in crisp detail the beautifully surreal origin story of the Dogon, which there are many versions of. So I encourage everyone to do their own research, because the Dogon are very much about the word, and the oral tradition, I think, is important to their ritual and passing down this sacred knowledge. So here we go. Ama is the Dogon name for Amen. Ama is described as the intelligent consciousness behind all of creation and the awareness within all beings, he who rests upon nothing, which actually reminds me of Vishnu resting on the bed of snakes and the lotus flower coming up, and that's his dream of creation, I believe. The Supreme God made the whole universe within a grain of Po. Inside the egg of the world, it spun and scattered the particles of matter in a sonorous and luminous motion, remaining, however, inaudible and invisible. Which reminds me of a cymatic. That's, okay, too much. Ama placed his word in the Po, thus making it the image of the creator. It's like a black hole. Placed 7 words in the Po, which vibrated strongly within the seed. Spiraling vibrations caused 4 clavicles. The Po burst forth, 8 new seeds were created. Ama planted these seeds in his egg near the clavicles of the Po. With these 8 seeds, Ama intended to create 8 celestial beings, 4 male and 4 female. The Dogon called these beings the Nomo. These 8 beings were going to be Ama's perfect creation. 4 fish twins were going to make each other fertile, complete, and blessed within heavenly happiness and fulfillment. However, one of the male twins, Ogo, grew impatient. Instead of awaiting patiently for the completion of Ama's work, he hurriedly made an ark and rushed into space, wishing to look at the world. So Ogo is obviously the star of this movie, and has a strong correlation actually to Ardra. Ogo is very much an Ardra archetype. So anyway, you can go on to read the rest of the article yourself, but it's an amazing, beautiful, surreal trip. So I will wrap up by wrapping back around to my Granny Susie, who I mentioned earlier in the video. She is most definitely the primary source of what I know of my ancestral lineage, and most certainly part of my Pitri ancestral spirit guides. So gratitude to Susie for inspiring me to delve into my origin story, because it has kind of led me to my lifelong obsession, which is a historical fiction anthology that deals with some alternative timeline stuff. And to kind of tease some content I'm going to drop in some future videos. Just like the Dogon were able to predict Sirius B and C before the scientific community was capable of it. Cats like Immanuel Velikovsky were predicting elements of Venus, that it was very recent, that it came from Jupiter through a cataclysm, that Jupiter was a source of radio waves, he made all these predictions, and he was cast aside by the scientific community, even though he was friends with Einstein. And so just like Velikovsky believed that there are periodic cataclysms that Earth goes through, much more frequent than history and science may be willing to admit. So the Dogon, with their rituals and traditional sacred wisdom keeping, that is part of their oath to this realm, is to sustain all of that through these cataclysms. So when you look at the context of history as possibly one of many cataclysms, I can start alluding to words like Tartaria and mud flood, and if you know what any of these terms mean, you might get an understanding of where I'm going with this alternative history anthology, which wraps around to the Trail of Tears in an interesting way, because Africans and Indians were living together in communities, and this is documented in the New York Times. They're talking about Cherokees owning African slaves, and this is a huge piece of history that has been lost to us. And when you reframe it in the context of cataclysms, the Trail of Tears, and especially what I found with my last 100% African ancestor being, having lived around the time of the Trail of Tears, it made my mind just go everywhere. So that's what I'm sort of doing the majority of my research towards, and these videos are hopefully a way for me to process that content in a public manner that is almost crowdsourcing. So gratitude for any help along the way. But yeah, so there's a lot to history and what we know and don't know, and piecing it all together through comparative mythology is kind of what I'm all about. So yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Gratitude.